Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He was born in the year of the elephant. Even as a child, he was special as evident. Birth of the Prophet mentioned in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 18:18. That's your reference. Perfectly proportioned, the most handsome, the most elegant, impeccable character, the most humble and intelligent, compassionate, considerate, in speeches most eloquent. Even before he was a prophet, he was a man of great eminence. He's ranked number 1 in Michael Hart's book, The Most Influential. Please refer to the books of hadith if you need to check his credentials. His message is worshipping Allah alone is essential, and the Quran and his teachings make up all our fundamentals. On the Day of Judgment, we rely on Allah's mercy and His intercession. His words pose of wisdom, teaching us valuable lessons, liberator of the woman's rights. He was against all oppressions. The English language cannot do justice. Forgive me for my indiscretions. His face is more radiant than the full moon, and his sweat smells better than the most expensive perfume. The light that shone bright like the sun shines at noon needs to follow his example if you want to be al-muttaqun. He came to an illiterate nation at a time of desperation. He was a real revolutionary who ruled by revelation. Seal of the Prophet, wish him peace and salutations. We testify he's the messenger of Allah before our daily congregations. When the Arabs worshipped fire and idols, he took them out of Jahiliyyah. Those were the real dark ages until people started to see it clear. He'd faced so many hardships, but yet he'd still persevere. And his da'wah is the reason why you see me standing here. Even his enemies knew him as a Sadiqul Amin. They tried to assassinate his character when he spread the message of Tawheed. He invited everybody to Surat al-Mustaqim, but most rejected his message and they didn't take heed. Every step he take was for Allah and His deen. Allah split the moon for the Quraysh, yet they still didn't believe. In fact, they tortured the believers. What a horrid sight it must have been. But imagine the status in Jannah of the earlier Shaheed. They called him a liar, a soothsayer, a madman and a magician. They couldn't swallow their pride and let go of their traditions. Offered him power, wealth and women to stop spreading the religion. But he said, even if you offer me the sun and the moon, I still won't accept your proposition. Even through the slander and the rumor spread that by the people of the Quraysh, the Ansar came to know about the Prophet's message and his demeanor. They accepted Islam and vowed to keep the Prophet safe. So the Messenger of Allah had migrated to Medina. The Medina. They threw animal intestines on the Prophet. He was in prostration. Even stepped on the blessed neck of the best of all creation. But instead of retaliation, he turned to his Lord in supplication. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Verily Allah is with the patient. He was boycotted, insulted, and treated like an outcast. But through the pain and the struggles, yet he'd still remain steadfast. He'd walk through the marketplaces and people used to point their fingers and they laughed. And the day that people used to throw rubbish on his head every time he walked past, and the day that they didn't, he didn't say good riddance and walk on. He went to see if these very same people were inflicted by some harm. These people saw the kindness of the Prophet. And eventually they accepted Islam. He's a mercy to mankind. He even says in the Quran, Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 107, he even led the Anbiya in Salah before he ascended above the heavens. When he went to preach in Ta'if, they pelted him with stones. He had blood-soaked shoes and he was bruised down to his bones. Jibreel alayhi salam descended and said, give me the command. I'll send the angel of the mountains to destroy all their homes. But Allah's merciful messenger said, no, let them be, for the land may one day be home to people who believe. I remember these stories in times of difficulty. I remind myself that the Prophet had it much more difficult than me. Even through the slander and the rumor spread by the people of the Quraysh, the Ansar came to know about the Prophet's message and his demeanor. They accepted Islam and vowed to keep the Prophet safe. So the Messenger of Allah had migrated to Medina. And at that time it was known as the city of Yathrib. He ended the tribal feuds and led the people with justice. The land of the dates became the real Islamic state. Became an even bigger problem to the people of Quraysh because their caravans to Sham were no longer safe. Yet the believers had a home and Islam had a base. He was content in every situation. Indeed, it is Allah's qadr. Even at the help of the angels at the Battle of Badr, He told us to love for ourselves while we live for one another. And subhanAllah, He referred to me and you as His brothers. I envy the sand that met His blessed feet. It's hard to comprehend how a man could be so humble. He's the perfect example for the likes of you and me. Even forgave the people that mutilated his uncle. The Sahaba, they became human shields for the Prophet. When he'd make wudu, they'd be sure to catch every single droplet that flowed off his blessed body. Their actions proved that they loved him more than anybody. Islam spread from Medina. Muslims multiplied in numbers. The idolaters in Mecca feared that their days were numbered. And when the Prophet returned to Mecca, he could have taken his revenge. And the people that used to oppress and torment him, he could have captured them all and enslaved them. He was in a position of power, surrounded by thousands of brave men. But what he did next left the people in amazement. He turned around and forgave them. The best leader, the best father, the best husband, and the best person. Imagine you were there and you had to lend an attentive ear and hear that the messenger of Allah may not be here with you next year. Indeed, the greatest of calamities is when he departed from this dunya. We show our love to the beloved by trying to hold on to his sunnah. Insha'Allah, on the day of judgment, we can drink from his blessed hand. 21st century role model, not your average 7th century man. May Allah reunite us with him in Jannah and protect us from the fire of Jahannam. We love him more than our own selves. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.